Seraphin, and today we're going to make sourdough baguettes with Tangzhong. A traditional baguette is a quintessential lean dough, as with most artisan breads. No eggs, no milk, no butter, nada, just the bare minimum you need to make a good bread. This ingredient list may sound simple, but just like the creation of many beautiful things in life, mastering the art of making the perfect baguettes can be quite a challenge. Because from the principal ingredients of flour, water, salt, and yeast, we need to make a quality baguette with many emergent properties not found in the original ingredients. For many bakers, this is a quest that takes many years, spanning all aspects from making the taste just right to getting a perfect ear on the bread. We cannot say we have achieved perfection, but we think it's pretty close. And to help you make the best sourdough baguettes, here are 5 points for success, based on science, of course. In practically every bread recipe, the flour you use makes a big difference in the results. This recipe is no different. French baguettes are generally made with softer wheat flours that have a higher ash content, which means that they typically have a little less gluten and use more of the whole wheat grain overall. We are using a strong bread flour of about 12% protein with a lower ash content, typically for Asian bread. But because we use Tangzhong and add a little bit of whole wheat, we can get something that's closer to a more authentic French baguette. Because Tangzhong denatures the proteins in the flour it uses, and whole wheat adds more nutrients and improves the flavor. Calculating the numbers, the total protein content of all the flour in this dough comes out to around 9%. Paired with an 80% hydration, a 9% flour alone would be insanity. But the Tangzhong helps to make this high hydration dough easier to handle by increasing the tenacity of the dough, and the whole wheat's water retention is much higher. So all in all, due to these reasons, we get this kind of dough. Using the right flour alone doesn't guarantee success if you don't treat the dough properly. We use 3 sets of 8 stretch and folds to develop the gluten, and you don't want to skip any of these. Just like in traditional kneading motions, we stretch the dough out and fold it back, realigning the gluten strands into a uniform and strong gluten network. The dough should pass the windowpane test as a matter of necessity. With sourdough in the picture, we want to make sure to develop the gluten structure well within the overall bulk fermentation time, since extending the time can cause the flour's enzymes to break down too many of the gluten proteins. It's all about finding the right balance between preventing too much gluten breakdown and getting enough flavor, which is our next point. Flour is tasteless until you can chop up all of those complex sugars and long protein chains into simpler sugars and amino acids. This takes time, which is part of why long fermentation almost always tastes better, especially for sourdough. The enzymes that tear up protein chains, proteolytic enzymes, work better under the acidic conditions that sourdough provides, which is how we get more amino acids that serve as flavor precursors, partly responsible for producing the umami and roasted flavors of sourdough. There are other enzymes in the dough that work to break down the starches, and since we're using Tangzhong, these enzymes have more damaged and gelatinized starch to break down. That's why you should do your best to allow the dough the time it needs to ferment for the best flavor. This flavor is further enhanced in our next point, that crispy crust distinctive in good hard breads like baguettes. You see, the experience of eating is complex, to say the least. We not only taste the food with our tongue, we also feel its texture and we smell the volatile compounds coming out of it. As a study done in France on baguettes found, the bread's crumb firmness and brittleness can impact the release of these volatile compounds. So basically, by chewing the hard bread, more of these compounds are released, resulting in a more flavorful and fragrant experience. Now, that's enjoying the bread. What about getting that kind of bread? One of the most important parts of getting a crisp crust on the bread is the baking process. You can make the recipe perfectly, meticulously ensuring that nothing's gone wrong, only to fall at the last step of baking and end up with a non-crispy bread, among other problems. Really, the key is steam and hot temperatures. The hot blast of the oven will give the bread that oven spring and cause a whole slew of reactions to speed up. And to support the oven spring as well as give the bread a crispy crust, we need steam. Saunas aren't just beneficial for people, as it turns out. The steam will allow the bread to expand for longer by keeping the surface moist and help slow down the rapid evaporation of moisture from the bread's crust, ultimately leading to a thin, crispy outer layer. The steam and baking process is actually quite a complex issue, which might be better covered in more detail in another video. Continuing for now, there are a lot of recipes with varying approaches to steaming their bread, but from our own experience, we've gotten the best results from using our Dutch oven. For one thing, it's really hot, so you don't lose too much heat when opening the oven, and the way it closes allows it to preserve steam inside, and you can add in an ice cube for more steam. You can also use something to cover the dough, which works just as well, and if you don't want to go for that, you can try adding a tray of water, either with or without lava stones, to help generate more steam. If you don't have any of those things, then you can just spray the dough like crazy and hope for the best. Alright, for our fifth point, this is more about getting a good-looking and tall baguette. If you want those things, then you need to make sure to score and proof your baguette dough properly before baking. Proofing has a heavy influence on the final gas cell structure of the bread, and both heavily underproofed and overproofed dough can result in flat baguettes. We need to bake the dough at the right point, when it's almost doubled, puffy, and doesn't fully bounce back with a poke test. When the dough is properly proofed, scoring will determine how it rips in the oven. As it expands, it will split apart at the score, and if we did everything properly, then it could even peel back, giving us this kind of ear on the baguette. As a result of these facts, the way we score the baguette can determine how it spreads and what the shape will be like. For a tall baguette, the best way to score it is by making almost vertical lines down the center. If you make the scores too horizontal, the baguette can spread out too much, and if it's too vertical, they could end up joining together into one long score. This is actually just a matter of appearance, in essence, but if you're aiming for the best baguette you can get, then you might want to practice scoring on some scrap dough. And those are all the points you need to know for now, so let's get straight into the recipe. We're going to get started with making our Tangzhong a day ahead of the main recipe so that we can let it rest in the fridge overnight for maximum benefits. But you could make it just before making the final dough as long as you let it cool for long enough. The first thing we need is inside the kettle I'm bringing to the table, 140 grams of boiling hot water, just measuring it into the bowl. Then we put away the kettle and quickly drop in 70 grams of flour, taking it off the scale and mixing immediately with a spatula. This is a very quick process. You can see here that less than a minute later, it looks pretty much done and evenly homogeneous. Just giving it a few more turns to check for loose flour, and then we're good. We'll clean off the spatula and cover the bowl with a cloth first, moving it to the side to cool. After letting it cool, we'll cover with a silicone cap and move it to the fridge overnight. Like we said before, you could just make it before the final dough as long as you give it enough time to cool. Now in the morning on the second day, we're going to make our leaven. We have a mature sourdough starter here, and we're going to measure out 15 grams of it into this bowl. It was fed regularly with bread flour, so you can see that the starter is still quite strong. After adding it in, we're going to pour in 30 grams of water and 30 grams of whole wheat flour right after. We'll clear the work surface and then mix everything together with the spatula right after. This is a 1:2 ratio for the starter in terms of starter, water, and flour, which is our standard for leaven. As we mentioned before, whole wheat has a higher water retention capacity, so the resulting leaven will come out pretty stiff and dry looking. That's fine. And it shouldn't take more than a few good turns to fully combine it into a homogeneous mixture. When it's gotten to that point, we'll just tidy up and clean the sides of the bowl and our spatula before covering the leaven with a silicone cap. We're going to leave it out for about 5 to 6 hours at 28 degrees Celsius or until it at least doubles in size. You may have to adjust this timing based on your sourdough and room temperature, as variations in those heavily impact the time needed for the leaven to double. Once both the tangzhong and the leaven are ready, we can make our final dough. I'll uncover both of those bowls and we jump right in. All the tangzhong goes in the bowl first, scooping it up and dropping it in. Our leaven is next. It's got that beautiful bubble structure indicative of a lively sourdough. That's great. Then we add 115 grams of water. We're now going to mix everything together first, breaking apart both the cold tangzhong and the starter with our spatula. This is an especially important step here because this is a no-knead recipe. If we added everything in at once, the amount of time it takes to properly mix the tangzhong into the dough would be almost enough to achieve full gluten development. So it's crucial that we break it down in the water before adding the flour. And when it looks like this, mostly combined without very large lumps, we're good. Before the flour goes in, we're going to quickly toss in 7 grams of salt, just sliding it in and mixing it well with the spatula. Then we add 245 grams of bread flour, giving that a good mix with the spatula, trying to get the loose flour into the liquid. It's a little bit of elbow grease, we just want to keep going for a bit. Once the dough is too dense to mix with the spatula, we're going to take a scraper and clean off the spatula on both sides, getting off all the dough. We'll scrape down the bowl's sides and then put the scraper away, kneading the dough a little bit to properly mix it. I'll make it clear again, this is a no-knead recipe, so there's no quick and forceful gluten development, but this is needed to get everything combined, especially since the tangzhong, as we said before, increases the dough's tenacity and makes it feel drier. So we're going to continue for about 2 to 3 more minutes, really making sure everything is well combined. Once it is well mixed and looks like this, we're done with the dough for now. I'll just clean off my hand with a scraper here. I also took the chance to clean up the bowl as best as I could, and I'll close it. We're leaving it for 45 minutes at a room temperature of 28 degrees Celsius. So after the time's up, we want to do a set of 8 stretch and folds. We have a bowl of water. We're going to be dipping our hands into it to prevent sticking. The dough should have relaxed at this point. We're simply going around the bowl, pulling one side up and folding it back down. Getting all 4 sides of the dough, doing this 8 times in total. With that done, we cover the bowl again, and we're done with our first set of stretch and folds. We let the dough rest for another 45 minutes before doing another set of the exact same 8 stretch and folds. The dough is quite taut and cohesive for a high hydration dough, and we mainly have tangzhong to thank for that, but this doesn't necessarily translate to gluten strength, so make sure to stretch the dough well and do it thoroughly. We go around the bowl twice, really letting that dough stretch and fold it back. Before covering it again and leaving it for 45 minutes. With the last round, we're going to start by doing the same thing as before, dipping our hand in the water, and then doing 4 stretch and folds, 1 for each side. But after that, we're going to switch out stretch and folds for coil folds, basically picking up the dough and letting gravity stretch it out before folding it down over itself. We're doing 4 of these, and by the end, we have a nice and smooth looking dough. We'll do a quick window pane test here, taking a small piece of the dough and spreading it out thin enough to see light through it. Make sure to do this very gently, since going too fast can cause it to rip easily. Here you can see this dough passes the test. You can easily see light through it. So we'll cover it and leave it for about 1 hour and 30 minutes or until it roughly doubles in size. Here it is after fermenting for that time. It's a lot more voluminous and looks pretty much ready for the next step, which is dividing and pre-shaping. We'll uncover the dough and move away the silicone mat beneath it before dramatically dusting the work surface with flour. Very fun, if a little impractical. We'll also dust the top of the dough in the bowl using quite a bit of flour. It's a sticky dough. Then with our scraper, we loosen the sides of the dough, moving fast. before scraping it out onto the work surface, flipping it over so the floured surface becomes the bottom. We want to weigh the whole thing next for a number, and after that we can either divide it into 4 smaller baguettes for baking in a Dutch oven, or into 2 or 3 for longer, more standard baguettes. This is up to personal preference and really depends on how you want to make these baguettes. A traditional baguette, of course, is quite long, but it is usually made with a large oven. As home bakers, we adjusted the length to our specific oven. Feel free to adjust the size to your own situation. After all, looks come second to taste in priority. And following that, we want to pre-shape the dough. Super simple. We fold one side of the dough into the center and fold the other side over it. Then we roll the entire thing up to really build some tension, using the scraper to clean it up. As a final step, we fold it in half like this, just adding a bit more tension, not too much, just to make sure the surface is smooth and a little taut. Give the dough a bit more strength too. We'll then set it aside and get to the rest of the dough pieces. Same thing as before, we just fold the dough into itself and roll it up. Before folding it one more time, always having the scraper at the ready to loosen any sticky bits and tidy up as needed. It took less than 2 minutes total to finish them all, and once they're pre-shaped, we're going to cover them and let them rest for 15 minutes as a bench rest. Due to the long shape of the baguette, we are going to need to really stretch out the dough later, so we want to make sure to let the dough relax. While they rest, we'll prepare their proofing spot by setting up a canvas cloth inside this wide tray. You could also prop the baguettes against something. The idea is just to make sure the baguettes have the support they need to rise up and not flatten out. To ensure that they don't stick, we're lining the cloth really well with rice flour. Bonus points if you do it like a pro in this way. This will prevent the dough from sticking to the cloth. Better safe than sorry, so line the cloth well. When that's done, we're going to set the tray aside. At this point, the dough is done resting and we can finally shape them. We dust the work surface and the tops of the dough pieces with some flour. Then we'll take the scraper and flip one piece of dough onto it, adding a bit more flour if needed to prevent sticking, spreading it over the dough surface to fully cover that bottom side of the dough. From here, we're going to try to spread the dough out into a bit of a longer rectangle, trying to get straight sides and gently working the dough out into a longer form. Not at all trying to degas it, we're being very gentle and not pressing too hard. Then we want to fold the top side down like this, sealing it down, rotating the dough before folding the other side over it, pressing down to seal again. With a bit more flour to dust our hands and the dough, we're going to basically fold the dough in half with one hand and seal it with the palm or the fingers of the other. We can flip it over and pinch to seal to really get that seam closed, getting the ends as well. Finally, we coat the dough in a little bit more flour and roll it out into a longer baguette. Using an even amount of strength and just rolling it out with our palms. When it's shaped, we transfer it over to the prepared couche, making sure that it's pressing up against the tray's sides. This is a support for one side of the baguette dough, and for the other side, we pull up the cloth to create a ridge. The next baguette will go right next to this one. That way they prop each other up. After that, it's back to shaping the dough, no different from before. We're using a bit of flour here and there to prevent sticking. Doing our best to make sure not too much gets folded inside the dough though, just making sure it stays on the outside. Once you're used to the shaping, it's really a quick process, and we just place the baguette doughs side by side, letting them press up against each other. We'll just speed through the rest of the baguette shaping processes. When they're all done, we want to cover the dough with the rest of the canvas cloth and let it proof for around an hour and a half or until it's almost double in size. About a half of an hour before they're done, we're also making sure to preheat our oven and the Dutch oven to 250 degrees Celsius. If you're using a baking pan or lava rocks for steam, then you want to preheat them starting now. Give them enough time to get very hot. Okay, the dough has risen to almost double in size since we last saw them, and the remaining two from just now have already been moved into the fridge to stall fermentation while we bake these ones. The oven is hot and ready. We move the entire canvas cloth out of the container. Then with this long board, we're going to transfer the dough to the parchment paper by flipping it over. We're never really touching or pressing the dough. We use the cloth and the board to handle it, and then gently roll it onto a long piece of parchment paper. All right, they're both on the parchment paper. We can give the dough a very quick little poke test. It should leave an indent like this and come back slowly. So we're now going to score them quickly. The key to a good score is getting the angle right and being firm and steady. If you tilt the blade too far forward, it can catch on the front, and too far back, and it'll drag on the back. It takes a little bit of practice to do it just right, especially if you want to get an ear, but it's quite simple once you get the hang of it. Quickly after scoring, we want to get the Dutch oven out of the oven. It was very hot, so do be careful. We're then going to slide the dough into the Dutch oven with this wooden board. Quick and calm, using the excess parchment to adjust its position if needed. Add 1 ice cube to ensure enough steam is in there, and then we close with the other side of the Dutch oven, taking it back to the oven right after that. We're baking with the lid on for 15 minutes at 250 degrees Celsius. This is plenty of time to ensure the dough rises well with the steam preventing the crust from drying out. And when we take the Dutch oven out of the oven to get the lid off, it should already have significantly risen and look beautiful. We put it back in the oven and let it bake for another 10 minutes at 230 degrees Celsius, lowering the temperature a little to get a beautiful even bake. Then we're done baking the baguettes. For the best crumb shots and to make sure the bread doesn't come out gummy, we leave the bread to cool for about an hour or two. Then we can cut it and enjoy. Look at that beautiful crumb structure. It tastes so good eaten plain, but fits with so many different styles of eating, from butter with jam to sandwiches. It's hard not to love a good baguette. No wonder it's so popular. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and bye!